And so when you see the task force on anti-Semitism going after Harvard, do you think that's more of a DOGE cutting?
I think it's bullshit. I think it's more of a bullshit cutting bullshit.
Molly Jong-Fast, welcome to the Golden Age.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
It's been a long time coming.
I know. Well, I just was waiting around to be invited. Nobody ever invites me. I have this whole theory that there are like all these group chats going on without me. And here I am also, I feel like I never get invited to people's podcasts, so I'm happy to be here.
That can't be true, but there is a group chat that you're not invited to, apparently, which is Pete Hegseth's new Signal group chat.
That's right.
Wife
Yeah, so there was the Houthi PC small group chat, which had like 17 people on it, including Jeffrey Goldberg. And then there's another group chat that was discovered by the New York Times. And then there was an NPR tweet that just came out where they said that Hegseth is going to be replaced. And then the 47 Rapid Response said no, fake news. So that's where we are today on Monday.
Wow. And I think Caroline Levitt this morning was pretty forceful in her defense of Hegseth. They seem to double down on everything.
So what's interesting is Trump 1.0, they would just fire people. There'd be mistakes were made. Okay, they're out. Trump 2.0, so far, I think they feel that firing people shows some kind of weakness. And so they're going to keep all these people. I think the problem with Hegseth is when you keep someone like that, when you fire someone, it sends the message that this is not okay, and then they're gone. Whereas when you keep that person on, then the question is like, are they still legitimate in the organization? Right. So there's, this is 3 million people in the DOD. Are they, if they know this about their boss, does that mean they don't trust their boss now? Does that mean they think that all newspapers are lies? I mean, what kind of world does Hegseth inherit after that?
Right. I mean, apparently he's already lost the Pentagon, according to one of the people he fired who just wrote an essay over the weekend in Politico magazine.
Yes.
Speaking of doubling down, I'd love to talk about the Trump deportation case in El Salvador with Mr. Garcia. Senator Van Hollen flew to El Salvador last week to meet with Garcia. What was your take on that? I know that you thought that Democrats need to stand up and fight more for cases like these.
Yeah, I mean, there's a groundswell in the base, and even I would say, just sort of in the world, that people want their electeds protecting their norms and institutions. And, before he went, Governor Newsom had said, you can't, focus more on the tariffs, which are going to destroy the economy, and not on the deportations, which are, the thinking there was that voters don't care if deportations happen to people who they don't like, right? And that's the thinking.
Right.
And that there had been polling, and this is true, right? This had been part of the election. The sort of dirty secret of the election was that there was polling that said voters don't really like they really like Trump on immigration. They want all of his stuff, right? They want the kids in cages. They want the stuff that we saw in the first iteration of Trump world. I don't actually think that's right. I don't think they want the kids in cages. I actually think they just liked some of it. Well, they liked some of it. They wanted a closed border, though, again, you have all these people who live in these border towns who have to go to Mexico to do stuff. So, that's the thing is sealing the border, that actually hurts residents of Texas who go to Mexico all the time. Some of this doesn't make a ton of sense, but okay. They certainly did. They wanted more accountability when it came to immigration. I think that's really what they wanted. They wanted people to be vetted, and if they were going to come in, to be processed. right? All stuff that would have required more money, which Trump, cut. Trump. There was a deal, remember last year, that was negotiated with Langford and Chris Murphy and Kirsten Sinema, and that deal would have put more money into judges and processing, because part of the problem with the border is it's just starved of resources. So they just don't have the money to process the people, to shut down the border, to send them back, etc. So
and Trump called that piece of legislation off, right?
Right, because he felt that the border was really what he had to run on. And, again, this guy has he won 2 elections because he has very good political instincts.
Great political instincts.
Yeah, that's how we got here. So Newsom says, it's not a winner for Democrats. Van Hollen goes down there anyway. The thinking is, it's a Maryland guy. He's one of his constituents, married to an American citizen, 3 American children. I read in the New York Times that they were all special needs children.
I read that too.
Yeah, which seems like a lot of special needs children, and then the husband is taken away. And he's also in a union. I don't know, like the steel workers union. His union is
an apprentice.
Apprentice, yeah. So here's a guy who is an apprentice in a union with 3 special needs children, married to a United States citizen, deported because Trump said he had these tattoos on his fingers. Again,
mistakenly deported.
Right, mistakenly deported. The court said he was mistakenly deported, and then they said no. Now they've spent sort of the weekend smearing him. But anyway, it turns out that voters don't the good news for all of us, because it's about norms and institutions, is that voters don't really like it when you deport people like that. Like, they want due process. So that is good news. And I also think voters are smart enough to hold 2 ideas in their heads, right? Tariffs are going to crush the economy, and also they don't want people disappearing in the middle of the night.
Do you worry that after deporting these 200 or so people to El Salvador, to that horrible prison, that we are going to...
CCOD.
Yes, exactly. That there will be a generation of young Republicans who believe in the gulags and who believe in disappearing people like this?
It's not good. I mean, I don't know how, there was an accelerationist argument for Trump. This is not my argument. I'm just saying there was an accelerationist argument for Trump, which was part of the original sin of 2016 was preventing Trump from doing a lot of the stuff he wanted to do. So when he was running for president, you would say to people, well, he says he's going to deport people. He says he's going to do this. He says he's going to do that. And they would say, no, but he didn't do it last time. So that is a real question. I don't think that this is popular. So I don't know that it happening will make people want it more. But it's certainly on the table in a way that it hasn't been in maybe 50 years in this country.
Right. And I think even though it was a mistake, they kind of backed into this thinking that it was good politics for them. We just discussed that it might not be. And if you were the head of the DNC, would you be advocating for Democrats to still defend Garcia and to be out there advocating for him? Or as Senator Van Hollen said over the weekend, he's really advocating for his rights and for due process.
Yeah. I mean, I think the important thing, Republicans are hoping that Democrats will be pro-gangs, right? That's what they're saying. They're pro-gangs. And I think that the thread here is this is due process, right? If somebody's a criminal, they should go to jail. But if somebody is just a guy who gets swept up in a group, I mean, that's the thing, is like the lawyer who was representing the government said it was a mistake, and then they kept going anyway. And I think also the fact that they're so on the wrong side of the Supreme Court here, this is like a super conservative court.
Right. The liberal Supreme Court, as you called it, was 9-0. In this,
right. Now I know. Like, yeah, you don't, that number doesn't, I'm sure Roberts had to like sit down with Thomas and Alito and be like, look, man. And that's why I think it was written so vaguely about getting him back, was because that was the only thing they could get Thomas and Alito to sign off on. But even after that, there was a 7-2 decision, which is all of the Trump justices saying, like, you got to do due process here. So this is a pretty... like the Supreme Court is saying no, no, no. And this is the same Supreme Court that was like, Trump is a king and he's got presidential immunity for whatever he wants to do whenever and ever. So like, you can't just love the Supreme Court when they do insane things. You have to also love them when they're just trying to protect the rule of law.
Another case that might work its way up to the Supreme Court involves DOGE. We're seeing a lot of cuts to federal programs that involve cancer research and things that are generally thought of as positive for the world and not really controversial. What's the Republican calculus with cutting things like cancer research?
So these NIH funds, this is like, this was early DOGE, right? Which is Elon Musk. The thing you have to remember here is like Elon Musk is learning how to do government in real time. So like this is a person who has not spent a lot of time worrying about the federal government, and now he's cutting it with a chainsaw. So like, for example, these indirect funding. So the way it works with an NIH grant is you get a grant and then your institution gets a grant that sort of covers some of your grant. So you work with special microscopes at Harvard, you're a cancer researcher, you get whatever millions of dollars, and Harvard gets in indirect funding too. Maybe it takes care of your microscope, maybe it takes care of your lab, maybe it takes care of the 20 people who work in your lab. Elon looked at this and said, no, I don't want indirect funding. I mean, I love the fact that this guy, not elected, right? Not from here, and this guy's like, no, I don't like the way this is funded. So he decided to limit. And I think like there's the kind of thing that makes a lot of sense when you have no experience with how the federal government works. But he said, we're going to limit it to 15% of the grant. So you can't get an 80% indirect funding on your grant, which maybe was, how it was. You can only get 15%. And that means basically that all these grants just got chopped in half. And then there's also funding freezes, and that is targeted more towards institutions. And again, this is this Erdogan thing of trying to go after, it's really Viktor Orban who taught Trump and Trumpism to go after institutions. And that came straight from CPAC and the man himself, who was like, if you're going to do this, you got to also attack institutions.
And so when you see the task force on anti-Semitism going after Harvard, do you think that's more of a DOGE cutting?
I think it's bullshit. I think it's more of a bullshit cutting bullshit. And so basically what's happening there is the ethos is you got to go after the hotbeds of intellectualism. You got to chill speech. You got to get people scared. You got to declare war on one of the really great jewels of American life, which is our education system. We are the envy of the world, or at least we were. And I think this is it about anti-Semitism? Alan Garber's a Jew. Like, there's a huge percentage of you certainly can make a case that anti-Semitism is a real problem. And we could talk about Josh Shapiro and the incredibly destructive and awful arson attack on his home as just some of the most disgusting that, we are both Jews and we know anti-Semitism is real. But does this administration want to prevent anti-Semitism? Is that why they're going after Harvard? I don't think so.
I tend to agree. And when you look at politics and the political landscape overall, you've been one of these voices who has actually advocated for impeachment or trying to bring
Not now. I mean, I just don't think it's doable right now because Democrats don't control the House. I think certainly if the Democrats are able to win back the House, they're going to inevitably go back, end up trying to impeach him again.
So you see that happening if Democrats win back the House?
100%. I mean, first of all, yeah, I can't. I mean, the stuff he's doing is insane. I mean, they're practically. You see, the Republicans in the Senate practically want to impeach him for the trade stuff. I mean, like you have people in this. I mean, you have at least 4 senators and probably more who would take away his powers on tariffs right now. If Democrats control the House, Trump would no longer have tariff power. There's a possibility that tariff power gets taken away from him by the Supreme Court.
Because it's not a national emergency, as he's declared.
There's a court case right now that's winding on its way up there, supported by Leonard Leo and Charles Koch, I think, that's about the whole. This is all prefaced on the idea that we're in a national emergency, and so Trump has these emergency trade powers. That is, I think, at best a stretch and at worst a lie. And if you have the Supreme Court, I see a world where they say, no.
That will be a very different Supreme Court than the one that gave a president all those powers just a year ago.
Right.
It's an interesting Supreme Court. They come down differently on a lot of different decisions.
But it's hard to imagine a world where they go against Leonard Leo.
Right. He's made a lot of those. Leonard Leo being the, I don't know if he's the founder, but certainly an influential voice in the Federalist Society.
I mean, it's just hard for me to imagine. And also, and besides Trump, who else and Peter Navarro, is there anyone else who is like loudly arguing for these broad, sweeping trade war with China?
Alone. No.
Is there even anyone who is like, this makes a lot of sense?
No, but he talked about it on the campaign trail and enough people knew that and still voted for him, but now everyone has to deal with the consequences.
Right. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, you can't find anyone, Like, I just think you could really see a world where that ends up not working out for them.
And looking ahead to 2026, you think the Democrats win back the House, I assume, but the Senate's hard. Do you think that? So,
I mean, I don't know. Look,
pick up seats.
Right. I don't know what happens. I think it's likely if we have normal elections, which we just have to assume we will, then I think Democrats win back the House because it's so tight anyway. And a lot of this is pretty unpopular. And then I think when you look at the Senate, right, you have Collins, who's up for re-election in Maine. Maine is already, you have Janet Mills, who's the governor of Maine, who has been in a basic war with Trump, right, over the federal funds, right, for trans athletes, for the high school trans athletes in Maine. You have Georgia, right? That's a seat Democrats have to protect. That's the Ossoff seat. You have this Nebraska seat, which is, I'm less worried about Nebraska. I'm more worried about, I'm sorry, I'm not worried about New Hampshire because I think New Hampshire's.
Sununu's not running.
He's not running. And I think, here's the question. If Republicans wanted to win those 2 seats, they would need Sununu to run in New Hampshire and they would need Brian Kemp to run in Georgia. And that would mean that both Brian Kemp and Sununu would have to defend Trumpism for the next 2 years. And the reason why those guys are well positioned to win in those states is because neither of them are Trumpers, right? They're more normal. So it's hard for me to imagine a world where those 2 guys can thread the needle of being Trump, of not getting Trump mad at them and winning the Senate. I think that's a hard line to walk.
And looking ahead to 2028, do you think Kamala Harris runs?
No, I don't think so. I think you're going to have like a really big primary. I mean, assuming everything is normal, you have a huge primary field. You'll have, I mean, in some ways, I think Josh Shapiro is in a better position than ever, right? Because he's in a purple state. He's shown that he has, I think he's in pretty good shape for this. He's sort of, especially compared to like Whitmer, who had that thing where she
what
was in the.
What was up with that, hiding in the
I mean, she
Oval
was,
Office?
She's trying to do what's right for her state. And Michigan is a state that has been hurt by offshoring manufacturing. So you can understand why tariffs for her are actually relevant and important. The problem is that whenever you dance, it's everything Trump touches. So like you go in there to make a deal with him and then he puts you in front of the cameras.
Can't really hide. Yeah.
So that's why she was hiding behind an envelope. Not the best.
No.
Not the best.
And do you think we get, in the same way that reality TV ushered in Donald Trump, someone from kind of new media, whether it's a Stephen A. or a podcaster, trying to run in 28?
It's certainly possible. I mean, there are a couple of like big celebrity possibilities. That's like Stephen A., Mark Cuban, one of those guys. I mean, it's possible. Look, this is, the primaries, the Democratic primaries are their own thing, right? Just like Republican primaries have been captured by Trump for such a long time. Democratic primaries are, it's sort of what the mood of the group is. So in 2016, in 2016, Hillary, it was her turn, right? She felt it was her turn. And so the sort of the powers that be kind of offshooted, and it ended up not being Bernie and ended up being her. Then in 2020, there was, I think, a real worry that only an old white guy could defeat Trump. And so there really was, I mean, I also think part of it was, I think Biden really did well in South Carolina, and that really drove him, because remember he lost the first two primary.
It wasn't
contests.
Looking good before South. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then COVID hit and everyone dropped out.
Yeah. So I think he had a certain he was able to kind of collect, consolidate.
He got lucky a little bit with the candidates dropping out after South Carolina.
But I also think he was, he felt like the kind of person who could defeat Trump. So now this is going to be totally different now, right? Because
unless Trump runs for a third term.
Yeah.
Which he will I think it's a possibility.
He'd be 83.
The betting markets, I think, have him as the third most likely
he'd be 83
presidential
running for
candidate
a third time. And it would be breaking the Constitution. But okay.
It would. I agree,
yeah.
but I don't think that would stop him from running. I agree with you.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree.
And, it's interesting. I had a conversation with someone the other day talking about, I don't think any American figure since FDR has loomed over the country the way that Trump has. Just because 2016 to 2020, he's president. He's still a force from 2021 to, through the 2024 election. And now we have 4 more years of him. So he's a very, very, obviously he's a very unique figure in American history, but no one's quite loomed over the country like he has.
I mean, I would say yes. I think he benefited a lot from like this post-COVID amnesia.
Right. That I agree.
So the question is like, he's only been president. He hasn't been president 100 days, and he's already got this trade war with China, which I think has really humongous, really kind of enormous, broad, sweeping implications that we're not yet to feel. Like China may just stop shipping us stuff, and that could be amazingly inflationary and worrying.
Totally. It's like Brexit, but for America.
Yeah, it is. I mean, so I do think that we just don't, I'm not sure, like, let's see where we are, because he's just doing so many really destructive things. And another thing is, like, with these NIH grants, just to get back to this for a second, something really smart written about this, but basically, a lot of these researches are being paused, right? So cancer research, Parkinson's research, Alzheimer's research. So this means that American pharmaceutical companies won't be able to keep up, but also, like, our scientific research. It's like you or I could get a cancer that would have been curable or treatable if this scientific research hadn't been interrupted.
Right.
Like,
it's on Democrats, though, to pin that on him and to be smart about it politically.
Yeah, they're known for that, so it should be fine.
Molly, tell me about the book that's coming out. I feel like I'm your last friend who hasn't read it.
Oh, I'll send it to you. I'll text you a PDF. So I have a book coming out on June 2nd, and it's a memoir. I just finished reading the audiobook. It was super traumatic. It's really, the audiobook, like, they never tell you how unfun that is. They're like, we're going to have you read your audiobook. And then you're like, oh my God, this is awful. Like, it's so, you just, like, are there. You're horrible.
Alone in a booth?
In a booth, and they have you it's really tough. Yes. So I have an audiobook. I have the book. It's about how it's meant to be like a year of magical thinking. It's very, it's very stressful, but it's very, like, different than the other stuff I do, which is interesting and pretty fun to do. Like, it feels like it's not politics.
It's about your mother.
It's about my mother and my husband getting cancer in this year between 2023 and 2024.
And people can pre-order it right now on Amazon?
Please.
Great. So I encourage everyone to do that. Molly, thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
Please buy my book. Please, please, please. I promise not to ask you for anything.